there are many, many good and honorable people who serve in government, and sometimes we lose track of that fact. But today's speaker represents the very, very best in public service. He brings honor, dedication, and perseverance to his job each and every day. He's a friend of clean government. He is a friend of open and accessible government, and he follows through on those principles regardless of the political consequences. Without further ado, I would like for you all to help me welcome a friend of the Georgia Public Policy Foundations, the Attorney General of the state of Georgia, Michael Bowers. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Griff. To Hank McCamish and all the members of the Board of Governors of the Public Policy Foundation, I thank you for this opportunity, and I thank you very much for the hospitality that you've shown Betty Rose and me this morning, and to my dear friend Joyce Carter Stevens. I'm especially appreciative for your sponsorship of this. We have a lot of elected public officials out here in the audience, and I'm not going to attempt to recognize all of them, but I would like for all of them to stand, and I have a specific purpose. All the elected folks, y'all stand up just a minute. Give them a hand. My specific purpose in asking y'all to recognize those people is for better or worse, and I submit in the main for the better. They take a lot upon their shoulders to get out and represent you. And they have laid, the people who stood up, have laid some very, very important groundwork. Groundwork of which I was not a participant, but have been a very gracious beneficiary in the past few months. So the folks that just stood up are due a lot of credit for some of the optimism that we're inflicted with at this time. I'd like to spend just a few minutes with you and take a look over the past year and look at where are we going. And I am no soothsayer by any stretch of the imagination. I'm the state's lawyer. I participate in politics. I do so willingly and lovingly. I think we're at an extraordinarily interesting time, and maybe that's true at any time in a vibrant, alive democracy. I'm not enough of a historian to say, but this is a particularly interesting time in which to live and participate in the body politic. About a year ago, I stood before many of y'all and told you that I was going to change parties, and there is nothing of which I'm more glad as an individual, because I've been treated so nice, and I feel like I have been a part of something that is very important and very worthwhile. And during this past year, we have had one of the most remarkable changes in politics of all the years that I've been participating. And I've been in and around it for about 20-something years. It is more than just a change in who's controlling the Congress. It runs far deeper. When the Speaker of the House of the Georgia General Assembly signs up on a bill, gets every committee chairman but one to sign up, and goes to the well, in times past, that meant you better vote for this. And when he can only get a vote by 4, only carry a bill by 4, tells you something has changed, and changed in a very dramatic way. And if you knew the object of the bill, you would be even more impressed, because the object was me. So I took a particular interest in this, but it tells you things have changed, and they have changed big time. And in the final analysis, the change that occurs in Cobb County, in Fayette County, in Union County, in Terrell County, and all the other counties of Georgia, the changes that take place down at the State House are going to have a far more dramatic impact on the government of this country and the government of this state than all of the changes in Washington that you can imagine. Because this is ultimately where we're going to decide our fate, is right here amongst ourselves. What I saw over the past year campaigning was something very, very interesting. As Betty Rose and I got out on the campaign trail, I saw people who are the very best that God's ever created, the American people, Georgians, very, very decent, good people. But they're mad as hell, to put it bluntly. They are so mad you can't imagine it. And their anger is rather easy to describe. And you've heard me, some of you, say this before, but this is what I saw. I saw people who said, look, Mike, we pay taxes. When you call on us, we fight the wars. We play by the rules. We love our neighbor as ourselves. We try to do what's right. We salute the flag over here. We pray to our God. And all you folks are laughing at us and snickering at us in politics, the media, entertainment, and all the academic experts. And we're sick and tired of that. And we want our government and our country back. And on November the 8th of 1994, they reached out, grabbed the government, shook it real good, and said, you better start paying attention to us. We have had it. Now, there's an enormous lesson in that, far beyond election results of November the 8th, 1994. I think the lesson is, and I'm no expert, but I think the lesson is we have experienced a fundamental change. And I personally believe that no matter what happens in Washington, you are going to see a dramatic change in the government of the state of Georgia and of all the counties and municipalities in this state. When I have the sheriffs come to me and say, Mike, can you help us get to be nonpartisan? When I have the district attorneys pass resolutions saying our office ought to be nonpartisan, that tells you something far more dramatic than what's happening in Washington. That tells you the people who know, the people who are out there dealing with the citizenry on a daily basis, sniff change in the air, and it's dramatic. Republicans are going to get elected in record numbers no matter what happens. It can be for good or bad. I personally believe that it is no longer a question of getting elected. That's not the question. The question is, can we govern? Can we govern? We will be elected for a few years here no matter what. But the question is, can we govern? And I think there are two or three things that we must do collectively if we are to govern successfully. The devil's always in the details. I'm not going to try to get into details, though. Let's talk some broad things that we must do in order to govern. The first is pretty simple. And if you're any student of history, just the slightest, you know this. You can win elections with resentment. You can't govern that way. You govern with vision. Proverbs 28, where there's no vision, the people perish. We must have a vision. And we've got to get together and determine what will that vision include. I have a perspective. Each of you has a perspective. Every member of the General Assembly in this audience today has a perspective on what that vision must include. I know a couple of things that have got to be in it. One, we've got to deal with the crime problem. There is nothing on the minds of our people the way the crime problem is. We've got to deal with it in a rational, sensible fashion. We've got to deal with it in keeping with our traditions of democracy, the rule of law, our civil liberties, all of that. We've got to keep all that together, but we must deal with that, and we fail to deal with that at our peril. For the short range, there's no issue, the failure to deal with which would cause our failure more than crime. Got to deal with it, and it's a tough, tough issue. The Georgia Supreme Court 10 days ago issued one of the most unbelievable decisions I have ever seen dealing with this issue. And if you haven't read it, whether you're a lawyer or a layman, doesn't matter, you ought to read it. They set up a quota system for the application of the criminal justice system. And I am not engaging in rhetoric. I'm telling you, cold, hard fact. That is not the way to deal with crime. That has got to be changed, but we must deal with the issue. Second issue that's got to be dealt with in this vision, from my perspective, is the very subject matter of that decision: race. This country cannot survive black and white. It won't work. Race is at one and the same time our genius and our burden. And we must deal with the burden aspect better. I believe myself, in the recesses of my heart, there's only one way to deal with it. Not with preferences, quotas, and certainly not with discrimination. It's to treat every human being as a creature of the Almighty and judge them on merit, content of character, and what they contribute, and nothing else. Period. Nothing. And that's the unique promise that this country has always held out. That's what the Constitution talks about. That's what the Declaration of Independence talked about. That's what Lincoln talked about. So those two things. We've got to have a vision. It must deal with crime, and it must deal with race. A second thing after vision that I think we must learn, and I'm being presumptive here. I'm the new boy telling a lot of you who laid groundwork what we ought to do, and I know that's an enormous risk, but I'm going to undertake it anyway. We must agree to disagree at times without being disagreeable. Every one of us has got an issue or two that's an absolute hot button. Every one of us. Carlton Henson and I here have litigated things for years. And you can push a button or two with me and him, get us worked up. There's everybody in this room, we got a button or two you can push and we're really hot. But somewhere out there in the middle is this enormous core of values upon which we all agree. And they're those things that the American people were so mad about for the past year. Play by the rules, treat everybody the same, love your neighbor, keep our streets safe, make our schools teach, get government off our back, keep lower taxes, and on. Give everybody a fair and equal opportunity and treat them all the same. Core values. We can unravel ourselves, engage in absolute self-destruction if we say, if you don't agree with me all the way across the board, you are a scoundrel. I'm often called to give talks about ethics and to government officials. One of the first things I always tell them is, look, never mistake disagreement for a lack of ethics. We're all going to disagree. If you were to single out one thing, maybe, among the whole pantheon of values of this country that makes us what we are, self-criticism. The fact that we don't agree on everything. And we can talk about it without having duels and without calling people scoundrels. Vision, agree to disagree without being disagreeable. And then one of the really tough ones, and it kind of ties back into one of those items I mentioned in the vision. We've got to reach out. We cannot be the party of middle-aged white boys. Can't do it. It will not work. We've got to reach out to women. We've got to reach out to minority citizens and say, look, your future is right here. Our future is together. And there's a very practical reason. There's more of them than there are middle-aged white boys. That's just a fact. And I am not suggesting in any way to give up principle. I'm not suggesting in any way to give up core values, but to say, look, we agree on core values. We stand together. They are what has made this country what it is, the greatest promise mankind has ever had. Let's get together, make it better, and we want everybody to have the same opportunity. But you're not going to get any special preferences. Period. Everyone in this room can come up with some more things that we must do in order to succeed at governing. Not a person in this room that hadn't got just as good ideas as I have. But I sincerely believe that we've got to have those three things: a vision, this agreement to disagree without being disagreeable, and we've got to reach out. And if we do, there's no telling where we can go. The promise that is this country and our state is untapped. It hadn't been that long ago that Georgia was third world. Just a very short time ago. When I was born in Jackson County, Georgia, the place where I was born, you could not get to from the state capitol without going on a dirt road. And I'm not talking about a driveway. I'm talking about going on dirt roads. And we've come an awful long way since then. But we haven't even begun to tap the potential of this state. We've got a significant percentage of our young men, particularly young men, and most especially young black men, who are an enormous potential, who are going to waste out there. And we've got to stop that. And if we tap the potential that is ours, there's no telling what we will pass on to our children and grandchildren. So I'm very optimistic. I think it is inevitable that the people whom you saw stand, and many others who did not stand as elected officials but who have run, and many of you who are interested, you are going to lead this state. And the question is not whether you're going to get elected. I will guarantee you that. There is a tidal wave already here. The question is, can we govern? Appreciate y'all's time, and I appreciate your attention, and I appreciate your hospitality more than I can tell you. Thank you very much.